The difference between man and God is this, that God is the creator and not like his creation. That is something that I'm sure every Muslim can appreciate. And so the way in which God shares a common essence, a common substance, is not the same way in which we share a common essence and a common substance. In other words, the analogy of human beings, three persons, one humanity, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly that. It's analogous. It's parallel to, it's not the same. Secondly, I argued earlier that for the entailment of the belief to be as binding as the rule of the belief, that the description of the entailment and the description of the belief must be accurate. His argument is based upon something that the church has consistently rejected, the confusion of the persons. He is arguing for confusion of the persons. And if he has arrived at that conclusion from Leibniz's law, then that means for the Christian, assuming that he has rendered Leibniz's law accurately, that Leibniz's law is not sufficient to describe the Trinity. Now I want him to answer my question about the Quran and not run away from it. He misconstrued my argument. He said that Muslims don't say that one reading is like another reading. We already know that. Why is he telling us something that was assumed at the basis of the argument? Repeating my own arguments back to me doesn't help him prove his point. He ignored the point that Muslims believe that these different readings are the same Quran, and he hasn't explained how. All he's done is say that we Muslims don't believe that these are the same readings. And I'm sorry for raising my voice, but his Muslim brother is heckling at the back whilst being quiet when Amir speaks, and that's why I have to shout, ladies and gentlemen. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, furthermore, he said that we Muslims don't confuse one reading of the Quran with the other one. Thank you for admitting there are different Qurans. But we Christians do not confuse the Father with the Son and the Son with the Holy Spirit. We say that they are distinct. It would be better for Amir to prosecute his argument not from Leibniz's law, which even if it did prove his argument, would simply be dismissed as philosophy insufficient to the task, and to actually make his argument from Christian sources. Furthermore, yes, the hadith does say that the fasting will intercede, but it does say that the Quran will intercede. Just pointing out that it says fasting will intercede doesn't get away from the fact that the Quran is said to intercede. Intercession is an attribute of person. There's other hadiths that talk about individual surahs interceding. So it gets even worse, and in those hadiths it doesn't mention fasting. So this is personhood to the Quran. Amir has persistently tried to use Leibniz's law to misdescribe my belief. Let's be charitable to Amir and say that he has a perfect grasp of Leibniz's law and that he knows it better than I do. Fine. Then I simply say that it is an insufficient lexicon to describe the Trinity because it tries to shoehorn the Trinity into something that the Trinity is not. He wants to know my position. There is one God, Father, Son and Holy Spirit, who share one essence. We cannot divide the divinity and we cannot confuse the persons. Engage in my position. Stop trying to arm wrestle me into believing something that I don't. I do not believe we can confuse the persons. I do not believe we can divide the divinity. Prosecute your argument on that basis. Prosecute your argument from our sources, and please, for the good of us all, answer the question about the Quran. In what way are Hafs and Duri the same? Let's just tidy up something. God is different from his creation. But the Quran is divine. Jesus Christ is divine. And so the analogous argument between the Trinity and the Quran is closer to one another than an argument between humanity and divinity. The problem with Amir is he didn't want to deal with the fact that I was willing to drop Leibniz's law to defend the position that the persons Father, Son and Holy Spirit could not be confused. If you're going to engage with what Christians believe, it's important you actually start with their starting assumptions, ladies and gentlemen. But he wanted to get us into a bind with lots of sophism and lots of ad hominem arguments against me, saying I couldn't debate, saying that I didn't know philosophy, saying that I wouldn't engage, that I was poor in hermeneutics, because he wanted me to agree with a law that by his construct could not describe the Trinity sufficiently, ladies and gentlemen. And when I brought out the fact that Muslims in the Quran have exactly the same problem, asserting that there's one Quran, when Amir admitted in this debate there are several Qurans. Thank you, Amir. He was unable to describe to us in what way were they the same Quran. The only thing that we got was, well, they came from Muhammad, the same source. But many things come from Muhammad. Hadiths come from Muhammad. But that doesn't mean that their Quran does it. So clearly that wasn't a sufficient answer.